Hello class. In this video, we're going to learn how to evaluate numerical expressions. But before we begin, I want you to pause this video and write your complete heading down. Your full name, first and last, the date, mathematics, your period number, and this assignment title called Evaluate Numerical Expressions. Now, before we go into evaluating numerical expressions, which means solving numerical expressions, we do need to go over two key terms and one set of rules. So our first definition that we are going to go over is evaluate. Now, you're used to hearing the word evaluate as to solve. It's to find the value of a numerical or algebraic expression. Don't worry about algebraic expressions now. We will work with them later on in the year. But right now we're looking at numerical expressions. So basically, evaluate means to solve, to find the answer. So it means to solve, okay? That is what a word evaluate is. That's what we will use from 5th grade up. Instead of the word to solve, it'll say to evaluate. The next word that we're going to look is what we call the order of operations. Order of operations is a special set of rules which gives the order in which calculations are done in an expression, whether it's numerical or algebraic. Now, this order of operation is very, very important and tells us how to solve something. Because if we didn't follow a specific rule, our expressions, when we solve them, we will get different answers. So a very long time ago, they created the order of operations. Before we go into how we solve, in which order, let us write in our notebooks and on our index cards both of these words and our definitions. Now that we have this, let's look at our order of operations. Normally, when we say what is the order of operations, people will turn around and say, oh, that's PEMDAS. Yes, it is PEMDAS, but what is PEMDAS? If you don't know that the order of operations is how to solve an expression or an equation, then you're not going to fully be able to solve our math stuff. So let's look exactly what is PEMDAS. Well, the order of operations, or a PEMDAS, is to perform operations in parentheses. Anything that is inside of parentheses, we have to solve. Now, if you turn around and you come to me and you're like, but Ms. Pascarella, there are different equations inside the parentheses. You follow to solving the inside of the parentheses with the rest of these steps before solving the stuff that's outside the parentheses. Once you're done solving the parentheses, you would then go on to solve exponents. And these are 3 to the 2nd power, 5 to the 10th power, things like that we had covered a couple of videos ago. This is our E in the PEMDAS. The first one's our P, the second one is the E in the PEMDAS. But this is why we kind of move away from the PEMDAS as our 3rd and our 4th step. If you look at PEMDAS, PEMDAS says multiplication and then division. So it says that you must multiply first and then divide. But that's not true, okay? You need to multiply and divide at the same time from left to right. So if multiplication comes first, you multiply. If division comes first, you divide first. So it's whatever the order it is. Now, if you say you divide, there's a division, then a multiplication, then a division, well, then if there was a multiplication, a division, then a multiplication, you would multiply first, then you would divide, and then you would multiply again. So it's always from left to right. And then our final step is add and subtract from left to right. This is the AS in PEMDAS. But again, in PEMDAS, it says to add first and then subtract. But that's not true. You do them at the same time from left to right. So if addition is first, you add first. If subtraction is first, you subtract first. If you have subtraction, then addition, then subtraction, then you would first subtract, then you would add, then you would subtract, going from left to right. You don't separate the ones on the 3 and the 4. So I want you to pause this video and I want you to write down these rules in your notebooks. Now that we have these rules down, remember parentheses first, then exponents, then you multiply and divide from left to right, and then you add and subtract from left to right. Neither one comes first as long as you're doing it from left to right, okay? Now that we have the rules down, let's actually look at an expression. Here we have this really long expression, and you might be going, oh my gosh, there is so much here. I'm going to get confused. How am I going to do this? Follow the steps. If you follow the steps and you write everything down, you will not get confused. So according to our rules here, the first thing we do is we solve what's in the parentheses. So I only have one set of parentheses. I have 24 minus 15. Well, 24 minus 15 is 9. So I'm going to write the 9 down, and then I'm going to copy the rest of the expression because I do not want to forget something later on, right? So I write down everything else after I solved it. Now I go back to my rule number 2. Rule 2 says solve exponents. Well, here I have an exponent, right? I have 3 to the second power. And technically, 3 to the second power means 3 times 3. So let's keep that in mind. So I'm going to solve that, and I know 3 times 3, because my exponent is 2, says I multiply the base twice, so I have 3 times 3. That is 9. So I'm going to rewrite the equations that I didn't move. Plus 32 plus 1 times, well, I'm replacing the 3 squared now with this 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is my 9. Now I relook, do I have any more exponents? No. So now I need to go to the next thing. So I go to my rule 3, and it says multiply and divide from left to right. So I look here at my expression and I go, addition, not multiplication. Next one is addition, not multiplication. So now I need to solve the 1 times 9 because that is my multiplication. So I have 9 plus 32 plus, 1 times 9 gives me 9, right? That is per my property of my identity property of multiplication. Anything times 1 stays the same. Now that I go back to here and I go, I have here now just my addition. I relook to make sure, addition's next. I add and subtract from left to right. So I look from left to right and I notice I have 2 additions. I can use the commutative property right now and switch the 32 and the 9 so that I can have 9 plus 9 plus 32. But just so that we're getting used to the order, I'm going to not use the commutative property and I'm going to do 9 plus 32. 9 plus 32 gave me 41. And then I'm adding the rest of the expression that I didn't touch. And then last but not least, I have 41 plus 9, which gives me 50. And then I'm going to circle my answer because that's my final answer. I want you to pause this video now, write this whole expression down and every single step that I wrote here into your notebooks. So you see, even when we have really long expressions, we have to follow a certain order. And by following the certain order, we make our steps easier and easier as we go. And you could always make little side notes like I did here, because I'm just doing it mentally. It's not my final answer. But when I have that answer, I rewrote the 9 with the rest of the expression. Or I could have done the work here on the side, put 3 to the second power equals 3 times 3, right? I could have done this equals 3 times 3, which then gives us our 9. That's also a good way of doing it. But now that we've gotten some practice, let's do one more. Here we have one. It's a bit simpler, right? So I go down my rules. My first rule said I need to solve anything in parentheses. So I look through this whole expression. I don't see any kinds of parentheses. So I know my step 1 is done. My step 2 is to solve our exponent, So I look through the expression and I notice I have 4 to the second power. And that means, because my exponent is 2, that I'm multiplying my base twice. So it's 4 times 4. and 4 times 4 equals 16. I did the work on the side. So now when I go in here, I can recopy all the other expressions, numbers and operations in my expression, right? And that is the one that we have for the 16. Now I go and I recheck no more exponents, so I can move to my step 3. Step 3 said to multiply and divide from left to right. So I go here and I go, all right, I have 72 divided by 9. That is the first operation and it's division, so I need to do that first. 72 divided by 9 is 8. And then I copy the rest of the expression, 8 plus 16 minus 16. I recheck to make sure that I have no more division or multiplication, in which case I don't, so I can go on to my last step, add and subtract from left to right. So I'm doing whatever comes first. In this case, I have 8 plus 16 is the first one. 8 plus 16 gives me 24. And then I just copy down the rest of the expression. Now I recheck and I notice I have a subtraction still, so I'm still not done with my rule 4. So now I got to do 24 minus 16. 24 minus 16 gives me 8, and that is my final answer. So I'm going to circle it, or I can box it. So notice that I had a complex expression that I followed the rules step by step, which made each step a little bit easier. I want you to pause this video now, write everything on this screen into your notebooks, including all work and your final answer. Now that we have this down and we've done 2 examples, I want you to try 2 on your own. Here are 2 different expressions that I want you to evaluate. Remember, evaluate means to solve. Write everything on the screen in your notebook, including the directions and the questions. And don't forget to show all of your work. This is crucial because the state may not give you partial credit, but I can give you partial credit and figure out where it was that you got confused at, especially now when we're evaluating. So make sure that you show all of your work. If you need to look back at this video at the other steps, you may do so as many times as you need to. Okay? If you get confused, that's fine. Show what you know or write out where it is that you're confused. Do not just leave it blank.